Alrighty, everything's filling up. Great to see.
Yeah, we've still got a minute to go, haven't we? So
Yeah, so
usually takes a minute or so for people to join, particularly
yeah,
if they're not
absolutely.
familiar with Zoom, because we find that we do a lot of our stuff on Zoom. And of course, a lot of companies use Teams. So it throws them a little bit.
Hmm.
Sometimes they've got permissions to get through. So I'm just going to type in here, hi everyone, we'll get started soon. If you have joined us a little bit early, do let us know where you're dialing in from. It's lovely to know where people, and
Hmm.
I always kind of say, particularly if they're UK, it's like, and what's the weather like with you? She's just really naff. But so I'm in Bucharest. I've just run a session for about 200 HR people,
Hmm.
and I couldn't believe the snow when I arrived last night. I
I was
mean,
about
it
to
wasn't
ask.
snowing, it was like, but it was piled up on the sides, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you are somewhere where there is snow, let us know. Or if you're just in the UK and it's sunny Sheffield, I bet it's glorious there today, Gemma. Is it actually sunny in the UK? I'm missing
It
it.
is.
I'm
Right now it is. Yeah.
seriously. Oh, Vilma, you're in Lithuania. Oh, yeah, it's snowing. Cambridge is sunny. Hi, Yvonne.
Hmm.
Lovely to see you. Jennifer, London. Oh, I can't believe it's sunny in the UK. No.
You're missing out, yeah.
Oh,
After
this
all
is
these weeks as well.
unbelievable. And Paulina's in Lithuania. Literally, the one day I go away from the UK and it's sunny.
Hmm.
This is so rotten. Welcome everybody joining. We've got a few more people joining.
Amazing. Are you just in Bucharest for the one day, or are you there for a couple
Yeah,
of
I'm
days?
going out with the clients who wanted me to come and speak to these lovely HR people. So I'm going out for
Hmm.
dinner with them tonight, but I'm on a very early flight tomorrow. So it's an
Mm.
early dinner. My car's coming at about 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So yeah, I
That
shall
is early.
be, yeah, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's just have a look at the chats. How are we? Participants 60. Maybe if we give it just another minute, I can still see some people are still coming in, and then we'll make a start.
Yeah, when we're doing our live webinars on our club, we always give it to 2 minutes past because it just helps people to find their way around Zoom.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you're either a Teams organization or you're a Zoom organization. You're never both,
Exactly,
are you?
exactly. How does it, Pietro? Pietro is saying Zoom always asks you to download the app. Yeah, you've
Yeah.
always got that
Yeah.
extra kind of level of permission to get through, haven't you?
Yeah. I think I've only downloaded the app maybe single digit number of times, actually. I've always joined as a web browser user. Okay, it is 2 minutes past exactly on my clock, Lucy. I don't know what it is on yours, but maybe if you're happy, we can make a start.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm 2 hours ahead actually, so it's 3 minutes past three for me.
Okay. Well, yeah, hello and welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tobias Rawson. I'm the UK director for a company called Melp. Now, today I'm joined by the lovely Lucy Adams, sort of to discuss employee engagement, specifically where we are, how we can improve, what is best practice. So maybe before we get started, Lucy, perhaps if you could just briefly introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tobias. And I kind of describe myself as a recovering HR director. You know, it's like I've been in HR for way too many years.
Hmm.
And I was an HR director for some pretty big corporates. So Serco, I worked for a big law firm. And I was also HR director of the BBC, which is the one place where I've worked where you can guarantee everybody's heard of it. Everywhere else, they kind of go, what do they do? But the BBC, you don't need to explain, doesn't matter where you are in the world. And that was amazing. It was an incredible experience, challenging, but amazing. But for the last 11 years, I really kind of took my frustrations that I had with the BBC, no, not the BBC, sorry, with HR at the BBC,
Hmm.
and prior to that. And I wanted to find ways of creating more innovation, doing things differently, thinking about the way we do things differently, and what we're going to talk about today with well-being, engagement, communications, being absolutely a good example of that. And so that's where Disruptive HR comes from, which is the company that I run now.
Hmm.
So Disruptive HR, we're so lucky. I mean, it started out, my business partner and I, we kind of thought, have we got a business here? Or is it just a bunch of frustrations that we've got about leaders and employees and HR? But we've worked all over the world in every sector, and it's been a wonderful journey. So still passionate, still believe
Hmm.
that there's a lot to do, um, but yeah, really, really love what we do.
Amazing. Yeah. And if you're happy to get started, I think so am I, Lucy. Maybe
Well,
just sort of
tell
one.
us about Melp though, because Melp is
Oh,
not
Melp.
well known. There's a lot of people from the UK here, so tell
True,
us
true.
about Melp.
Yeah, Melp is it's a very good question. Melp is an employee engagement benefits platform. The way that I like to position it is there is sort of something there for everyone. There's something there for employees, and if you're creating this sort of high engagement area for employees, then it creates this de facto opportunity for HR as well to engage people exactly where they are. And we're an app first experience. We do have a desktop experience as well, but we like to think about living in the employees' pockets. So we're there with them all the time. And so we're kind of this all encompassing employee companion app, let's say, for rules and recognition, for internal communication, for benefits management, perks, all that sort of stuff.
Great. So I've just put into the chat, let us know where you're dialing in from. It's always lovely to know where people are. For those of you who've joined a little bit later, I was moaning about the fact that I've just left the UK for a couple of days. I'm in Bucharest doing a session with some clients and some HR people. And it turns out it's sunny in the UK on the one day that I leave. So finally, but everybody's welcome. And the reason as well that I kind of wanted you to get familiar with the chat, no sun in Amsterdam. There you go. So Tobias, you're in the right place being in the
Yeah,
UK.
yeah.
Um, is do let us know if you've got any questions as we're going
Mm,
through, any, or even just not a question, but a challenge, an observation. Maybe you're doing amazing things in this area. So do let us know. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
Tobias, back to you.
Yeah, no, that's just really good. Yeah, if we can create this kind of forum of yeah, best practice sharing and sharing experience, then even better, I think. So I think sort of to kick things off then, maybe if we can sort of start by taking count and identifying and sort of diagnosing the problem. So, Lucy, when it comes to sort of organizations getting things wrong with engagement and sort of energy and employee experience, what is it that isn't working right now?
My sense from my own experience as an HR director, but also with the thousands of HR practitioners that we work with every year, is that firstly, I want to point out that it's not for the lack of effort, right? So HR people are working so hard and they care passionately about getting this right. But there still seems to be a little bit of the parent-child dynamic going on when it comes to
Mm,
well-being. It's still kind of initiative-driven, program-driven, campaign-driven, and it's kind of stuff that we do for and to employees. So I think that's the first thing is that it still feels like a little bit that it's something that kind of is done to them. Um, I think there's also, it's just the sheer volume of stuff that we do. And when people are time poor, focused on results, busy, it kind of feels that we're perhaps taking them away from the day job.
Mm,
And so I think there's a sort of kind of risk that we are kind of overwhelming them with a whole raft of initiatives. So it feels parental, it feels a bit initiative heavy when people are time poor. But I would also suggest that we're not actually addressing the real things that cause disengagement at work. And so I think there's a risk that we focus on the perks and we're trying so desperately hard to make things great for people, but we're not addressing the reasons why people actually disengage. And I'm sure we can come on and talk about that.
mm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I guess it kind of relates to this idea that it's kind of a lived experience, right? It's not kind of a binary event, like you say. It's not just a program or something that we do at onboarding and at every 6 month, quarterly review, whatever. It is this kind of continual experience within the organization and how employees interpret their experience with the organization. Just to sort of provide some anecdotal evidence there, I think I was speaking to Jane Emma Peerless recently, who is the CPO of a fintech company called Caxton, and very fitting for a fintech company. She was introducing me to this concept that she has of the wellness wallet. And it's this idea that we all have one, and we're constantly making withdrawals and deposits into the wallet. And her sentiment there really was that we need to create cultures within organizations that pushes us towards net deposits rather than withdrawals. And I just really like that concept because it's not just a sort of a theory that only lives in our minds. There is a genuine practicality to that whole thing, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think, also we kind of miss the fact that most people's lived experience is in terms of their team and their line manager.
Mm,
And quite often when we're focused on creating these initiatives or campaigns, we're almost kind of bypassing the line manager and we're trying to do directly to employees. Where of course, most people's day-to-day lived experience is through their line manager, through their team,
hmm
through the work that we do. So
hmm
I think if we can come at it less from a sort of slightly parental initiative based, doing more to employees, and instead focus on the things that really matter, the moments that create those debits or credits, and think about working through line managers and make it easier for them to create a broader sense of well-being and engagement, then I think we've got more chance. But I think you make a really good point though, Tobias, which is that it's not a question of people always feeling great or always feeling depleted.
Yeah, it's a
You know,
dynamic picture.
it's a dynamic, it's very, very fluid. We have a row with our wife or our girlfriend or our boyfriend, and we're going to feel a bit crappier than we did the day before, right? And
Mm,
we're going to
mm.
take that into work with us. So it's not all about the work. And of course, I think, for the purposes of today, we're not really also talking about those people who have severe issues with mental health or
hmm
are particularly fragile emotionally. I think we're just talking about kind of rank and file people who
Talking
are
about
just
life.
just turning up, doing their work. What is going on?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And sort of just to sort of keep that thing going, I think it's also a little bit disingenuous if we create cultures that expects everyone to be happy all the time and absolute peak productivity. And ultimately that kind of destroys the trust between, I guess, HR and leadership and colleagues and employees. It's far better to have a realistic expectation and create a culture around that expectation.
Yeah, and it should be fine to say, actually, I'm a bit fed up, and it should be fine to
Mm,
say that, things aren't going that great, and feel safe to have those conversations. But equally, it's as you say, it's not about everybody feeling like kind of Pollyanna-ish and everything's marvelous. And I think a lot of
mm,
those kind of well-being engagement initiatives are like happy, happy. Whereas
yeah.
actually, what you and I are talking about here today is that kind of general, I turn up to work and what does it feel like on a Tuesday afternoon,
Mm.
right? What does it feel like for me as an individual?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've sort of described this problem. Of course, we can't make any claims without looking at data, right? So
Yeah.
when we hear things like engagement fatigue, job hugging, emotional disconnection. Yeah, Lucy, what does the data actually tell us about that?
Well, the data is fairly grim, to be honest, Tobias.
Mm,
I mean, there is stacks of data. I'll call out a couple. So I think Gallup's pretty good on this. But 23% of people are disengaged.
hmm
Um, or then you've got this new term that everyone got introduced to, which is quiet quitting. Nearly
hmm
60% of people this quiet quitting, where it's not that they're actively, they're not terrorists, right? They're not kind of being actively acting against the business, but they're just kind of a bit meh, they're
mm,
just a bit disengaged. Um, and if they had a choice, or if they felt they had a choice, they might choose to leave, but because of insecurity, they're staying. Um, so I think it's like the UK ranks the lowest. So apologies for people who are outside the UK for focusing on the UK, but UK engagement levels are, well below some of the rest of the world. So this is, and I think for me, the big issue is less about the scary stats, but more about the fact that this hasn't changed dramatically. Weirdly, we saw a little bit of an uplift during the COVID crisis. Um, and there is something about that kind of short term lift that you get when you're in a crisis as an
mm,
organization. Louise is asking, why is the UK less than the rest of the world? I don't think it's less than the rest of the world, but it is lower than some counterparts in Europe, for example. I suppose, we all, if you're UK based, you'd like to think that you're performing well, but the evidence so far is that actually the UK is pretty low. And that might be, again, part of the kind of, the stuff that we're reading in the media right now. All of that impacts on how people are feeling, not just about their day-to-day experience, but generally what are they taking in with them to that day-to-day experience. So in
mm.
summary, Tobias, the data is not great, right? The data is saying that we've been fairly flat with engagement. We have significant numbers who are neither disengaged nor engaged, but they're just feeling pretty flat. We've got numbers that are where people are actively, sort of working against the organization, disengaged, and the
hmm
numbers of people who feel good about being at their workplace is pretty low. So I think
Yeah, yeah,
it's fair to say that we have an issue.
yeah, and just sort of to I guess riff with that. How does that emotional disconnection sort of actually manifest on a practical level?
Yeah, well, I think it's that kind of um, not contributing, not wanting to embrace new ideas, cynicism. We've all
hmm
faced it, I mean, I've
mm
been there at the BBC where we had significant numbers of people who I think, personally speaking, I think they stayed because they were worried about getting another job elsewhere. They had good pension and retirement benefits. They were
hmm
waiting for the next round of redundancies because they thought they might get a payoff. So they weren't staying because they loved it. They kind of believed in the BBC and the purpose of the BBC, but their day-to-day experience was pretty low. So we've kind of come across that. Sorry, I've forgotten the question. What was the question, Tobias?
No, I mean you
How
were
does
bang
it
on really.
show up? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. No, you gave prime examples of that, so that's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, the kind of lead on question from that though is okay, if this behavior is manifesting, what are some of the things that we're doing that's making it worse from an organizational perspective? I guess that goes back to this program question at the very beginning. What are some of the activities that we're doing that actually aren't helping and they're just adding to the bloat, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we kind of mentioned quite a few of those, didn't we? Those kind of well-being initiatives,
Mm,
uh, big kind of engagement campaigns, which is all about, let's kind of look at how we're all going to have a wonderful time. I want to pick up the point that, let me just, where are we? We, bear with me. Beck, sorry, Beck. Beck makes the point that one of the issues that we face is that we still employ and promote people into people management roles who don't really want to be around people, right? So they
Mm,
wanted that progression, they
yes.
wanted that promotion, they wanted that increase in salary and increase in status, all perfectly valid reasons to want to progress. But they then inherit these people.
Yeah.
And so many of them, I think, if there's one issue I could kind of say that every HR person I ever meet says that this is something that they experience is that we're still got people in people management roles who are neither equipped and in some cases neither motivated to actually talk and engage and think about what their people might mean. Um, so I think that one of the issues that we do need to tackle is looking at people management capability in this
Hmm.
area. But there are also lots of other things that we can do, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with that sentiment actually. And it kind of goes back to the culture thing that we spoke about previously. It's how do you actually coach your managerial positions to tackle a very specific scenario, and it seems kind of trivial, or some people might doubt the reason why that's important because it's just a 10-minute conversation and that's it and it's done. But actually it's those micro moments that really influence someone's perception of their own work.
Yeah, and I think for me the key thing is leaders feeling a little bit more confident and comfortable with listening.
Mm,
Because it's all very well having conversations, but it's not necessarily their job to fix. But we do want to feel that our leader cares. We do want to feel that our line manager actually is interested in how we're feeling. Not necessarily that they solve it all, because sometimes it might be something that we're experiencing at home, could be financially, it could be physically how we're feeling. We're not necessarily looking to our leaders and managers to fix, but we are looking to them to listen.
mm,
And when leaders are time poor or they're worried about getting it wrong, saying the wrong thing, potentially ending up in tribunal, and I think this is an area that is really scary for managers. It's something that they I'm sure could do more of, but they're really anxious about how do I even engage in this conversation.
yeah.
Um, and so I think this kind of helping leaders ask the right questions and then not listening to the answer to fix the issue, but just listening to show that you care.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's sort of summarize the situation currently then. Let's recap. So we've sort of identified that investment into engagement and well-being is there. Which is great to see. It's not uncommon to see a program in place. The data, though, is showing that that isn't helping. And when we look at what organizations are typically doing, the solutions that might make sense to leadership or to the organization could be perceived actually as bloat to colleagues. It's an extra thing to do. So, Lucy, the question there is, if it's not about more programs, what does actually create better well-being and sort of sustainable engagement?
Yeah, so I mean, the way that we position it in disruptive HR is that there are a number of things that all of the research backs up and supports better health, engagement, well-being. First
Mm,
up, and I should say, and doesn't need a program, right? It doesn't need a massive investment. The first one is trust, and linked to that
mm,
trust, flexibility.
mhm,
So, loads of evidence to suggest that if we feel we have greater levels of autonomy over our work, and if we have greater levels of autonomy about how we work, where we work, when we work, that we are likely to feel more engaged and have a stronger sense of well-being as a result of that autonomy and trust. Unfortunately, we've seen two reactions to the hybrid working kind of response that happened during COVID. The first one is that we started mandating the number of days, so in for 3 days, out for two, which is just such old fashioned thinking, rather than talking to your employees like they do at Swiss Re or like they do at O2 or
mm,
like they do even at HMRC, which is for British people, you will know is a kind of, public body. Um, but to talk about coming in when it has purpose and value, and really thinking through, when is it right for this individual, the team, the work? When is it right for us to be together? And when does
Mm.
it make sense for us to be working remotely?
Yeah.
So I would say that kind of trust and flexibility. I just want to point out that we've got some questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, I can't actually see the Q&A. So either I'm going to rely on Tobias asking those, so don't feel like we're ignoring you. Or if you can be bothered, write it in the chat instead, and I can definitely see that. So apologies, we're not ignoring you. The second thing is that we want, and we've already touched on this, is that we want to feel that our leader cares about us and also cares about our career. So it's not just about our well-being, but it's our progression. It's our role in the organization. And so that kind of sense of, frequent check-ins, asking the right questions, listening, not to fix, but to at least just understand. And most grown-ups are actually capable of arriving at the solutions themselves, but
Mm.
feeling like you have somebody who cares. I always kind of think about one of the best bosses I had, and I was going through a difficult time. And he kind of took me to one side and he just said, look, I know you're going through a difficult time. I want you to know that I'm here for you. However, I'm going to treat you like a grown up. I'm not going to fuss over you or take work off you or insist you take annual leave. I'm going to trust you to manage your own well-being, but
Mm.
you need to also know that I am here and that if you need anything, I will support you. And I have to say, it was the most empowering and powerful thing I've
Mm.
ever I've ever experienced, because I knew that the care was there, but equally I wasn't being patronized and I wasn't
No,
being
he
kind.
he offered you autonomy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, he wasn't shying away from it. He wasn't pretending that he hadn't seen me when I was in the office, which all of which I've seen leaders do. So
Hmm.
I think there's that kind of care. We want them to know that they care a bit about us. It isn't about fixing. And I think as HR professionals, we can let leaders know their job isn't necessarily to fix it. It's to let them know that they're interested, that they might not have all the answers, but they're there.
Yeah.
We've got some great questions coming through, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish off on what I think we can do, and then
Hmm.
maybe we could have a look at some of the questions.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think we know that the third, so we talked about trust and flexibility, care that feels personal, that we feel listened to, that we feel heard. The third area is a sense of belonging, right? So that sense of I've got people I'm connected to, I belong here. We can look at it in terms of inclusion, we can look at it in terms of onboarding, but I think it's that sense of I feel I can be myself here and I have connections. And so much of what we do with things like onboarding are actually all about conform, fit in, here's what we expect of you. We could just change it slightly by saying, our onboarding is about finding out about you, what makes you special, really want to understand the brilliant and unique contributions that you can bring to this organization, but also how do you learn? What makes you feel recognized and supported? So I think there's that kind of sense of connection, belonging. There's loads of stuff we can do there. I would
Mm.
also say regular recognition. We know that people who are recognized regularly, this isn't about giving people money. This is about job well done, a little kind of thank you card, a shout out in a team meeting, costs nothing. But people who are recognized regularly are 4 to 8 times more engaged, right? Than those people who only get that end of year bonus, which makes everybody feel a bit meh.
Hmm.
And then the final one I'll call out, which is I think the one that we often ignore both in HR but also as leaders, is that what contributes to well-being is being able to do our jobs hassle-free. Every time we put an obstacle in someone's path, we give them another approval level to go through, the printer doesn't work, all of these things create an environment that makes people's jobs harder. And I think we think so often in HR about what more can we do, but what could we take away? What could we make easier? How could we simplify and remove the hassle? So I think there's loads that we can do that aren't program or initiative based. Some of them relate to managers. Many of them relate to managers, but equally we can help with that. So I'm just going to have a quick look at some of
Yeah,
the
go ahead, go
questions
ahead.
that are coming through. So let's have a look. Uh, so we've got an anonymous question which says, sorry, my thing keeps going really quickly. When you work with organizations that have large frontline or deskless workforces, what's the single biggest mistake you see HR teams make when they try to bring recognition programs to those teams? Really interesting question. The biggest mistake that they make, I think, is one size fits all. There's an assumption that everybody who works in this particular area are going to be feeling good about a particular type of recognition. So the ability to personalize, I would say, is absolutely crucial. I think is the one that hits top of mind. I'm just going to pick up another one. Do you think
Mhm.
organizations treat the symptoms of disengagement rather than the root cause? And if so, what is the root cause they're usually missing? I would say so much of it comes down to trust. So yes, I agree with you, anonymous caller, but I absolutely agree with you that we tend to treat the symptoms rather than looking at what is it that is preventing someone from feeling engaged at work? Is it that they don't feel connected? Is it that they feel that they don't have any autonomy? Is it they don't feel trusted? Do they not feel valued? We know that these are the things that actually make people feel disengaged. And I think that the key one is that people don't feel trusted and they don't feel valued. Sorry, that's two.
That's all good. Yeah, actually, just to sort of pick up on that trust piece there as well. Again, just to provide some extra anecdotal evidence, I was speaking with another HR professional recently, and they said that they actually felt that they had managed to increase the level of trust between themselves, the HR department, and the employees, despite having gone through a round of redundancies. And it's simply because they were very truthful and very honest about that entire process. They didn't sugarcoat it. They gave a realistic heads up. They made sure they were engaging in peer-to-peer communication rather than some sort of perceived hierarchical communication. And perhaps that's kind of stating the obvious, but I think especially after COVID, everyone kind of knows how they want to be treated at work. I think if you were to ask, the majority of people would say, actually, truth and honesty, please, above all else, even in tough situations, and really creating that sort of peer-to-peer communication style.
Yeah, it's really interesting that actually a really difficult situation, well, like we talked about COVID earlier, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to see engagement decrease. And I was thinking about WD-40. So, the where they kind of that's the limit of my technical knowledge. But the chief exec of WD-40, Gary somebody, he was
Mm,
talking. When they were going through the global financial crisis. So we're talking some time ago now, but during the
mm,
global financial crisis, he put out a mantra to his team, which is no lying, no faking, no hiding conversations. And I really wish I'd had that at the BBC, because the minute there was redundancies or there was a crisis, and let's face it, the BBC is perpetually in crisis, um, execs would disappear and start using the kind of the lift, that didn't, so they didn't have to walk through
mm,
reception. I remember
mm,
doing a big redundancy round in the law firm that I was working for, and one of the partners there said, right, I've made the announcement. And he was kind of perspiring with the effort, but he's like, I've made the announcement. He said, and now I'm just going to go off and play golf and just get out the way. And I was like, absolutely not. You get
mm.
out there, you go around, you stand at their desks, you get a sense of, that's being a leader, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Is hearing the difficult stuff. So that kind of no lying, no hiding, no faking conversations, as you say, Tobias, it's that kind of honest, take out the corporate language, stop using the jargon, don't use
yeah.
euphemisms. The
Yep.
thing that most people struggle with during those difficult times is uncertainty. So even if it's bad news, just being really, really clear. I really like what Athena do when it comes to giving people clarity around if they're not performing. And, I've seen so many instances where people have had a conversation with their manager. The manager thinks they're having a difficult conversation, and the individual is left none the wiser by the end of it. Because the managers used euphemisms or has sugar-coated it or has
Hmm.
used corporate speak.
Hmm.
And what they do at Athena is that if you're going through a kind of poor performance discussion, it's either a yellow, an orange, or a red situation. Yellow is no biggie, but you need to learn from it, right?
Yeah.
Orange
Yeah.
is you probably need to address it because it could affect your promotion or pay increase prospects. And the third one is a red situation, which is you really need to sort this, otherwise your job might be at risk. And what they found was just like using this simple technique of just being clear with people
Hmm.
enabled at least a kind of less ambiguous, problematic conversation, even if it was
Mm.
bad news. People knew where they stood.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to kind of shift the conversation on the flip side of communication. We've spoken about kind of how we talk, but we need to think about also how we listen, right? Now, of course, we have sort of engagement surveys and all these traditional ways of listening, let's say. Um, but what does actual listening look like moving forward, moving past sort of traditional engagement surveys to you, Lucy?
Oh God, I mean, if only we could move past traditional engagement surveys. They're just hellish, aren't they? This kind of once a year. I always remember meeting the head of engagement for Virgin Trains, and he said, we realized that we were asking our customers, 1,500 of them a day, how they felt about us, but we were
Mm,
asking our employees once a year. So there's definitely something about frequency. But what I think a lot of us have done, we've moved away from annual engagement to what we see as pulse surveys, but we've just taken the questions from the annual engagement survey and we've done it more often. And then people are just so fed up because they're being
yeah, yeah.
surveyed all the time. So I don't think there's anything wrong if you want to do your annual engagement survey as a kind of barometer of year on year how we're doing. But let's be realistic, it's not giving you a sense of how people are typically feeling. So I think there's the kind of classic thing, which is asking how engaged are you? And that's our annual engagement survey. But
Hmm.
there's also this kind of, in the moment, what's getting in the way for you right now? Name, something that's kind of frustrating you. So that kind of in the moment. Then you've got major kind of topical, excuse me, certain key episodes, onboarding being one of them. Tell us about how you like to be managed. Stay
Mm,
conversations. Give us a sense of why you joined us. Are we still living up to your expectations? Moments in people's lives when they come back after work, after an absence, or maybe they've been on maternity leave, um, or they've just been promoted, or they've just had a change of role. There are kind of fantastic moments where we can check in with people in addition to the in the moment pulse surveys. And of course, technology just makes life so much easier
the
here,
wonderful
right?
thing.
But in this instance, it makes it just so much easier.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I really agree with you on sort of taking, let's say, the temperature of someone's room at very pivotal moments in their sort of career history within the organization. And I suppose the objective there isn't necessarily more data, but actually faster action, right?
Yeah, well, it's two things, I think. The action is part of it, absolutely. So I loved Heineken's approach. They used to say, tell us how you're feeling and what's causing your frustration or what's causing your feeling of positivity. So they were clear not just on the issue or the level of the temperature of the organization, but what was causing it. But they had a kind of 48-hour turnaround, right? So,
Mm,
and sometimes that turnaround might be can't do anything about this because of X, Y, and Z, but it's about getting back to people. I think that sense of I'm going to, write in and give my all in terms of this 60 questionnaire, and then I hear nothing for 3, 4, 6 months, or nothing seems to change. Whereas I think that rapidity, as you rightly say, I think is vital. Um,
Mm,
but I also think that it's about this sense of um, a range of data, right? So it's not enough just to have a survey. A survey is going to raise more questions than it answers. But I think in HR, we can use a blend of the great survey tools. We can analyze uh, open text. We can create focus groups. We can do observation techniques. And if we're really thoughtful about it and intentional about it, we can build an incredibly powerful story that tells us how our people are feeling, what's causing the issues, where we could have some a direct intervention and take action. But it also means that we can tell a story to our leaders that where they don't just quiz the data and
mm,
dispute the methodology, and which
yeah,
we've all seen.
absolutely. Lucy, maybe just a quick question whilst it's in our minds.
Yeah.
Someone anonymous writes, um, often using green, red, and yellow is great from someone like HR, but sometimes line managers haven't been trained in how to communicate and make a mess that HR has to clean. The question there is, how can we make sure new leaders or managers have the right support to handle difficult conversations like that?
Yeah, well, I think again, there's two issues here. Firstly, is having some kind of traffic light system. It should be something that is really clear to the whole organization. This is what it means. So it
Mm,
can be part of the welcome handbook. It's
yeah.
something that gets communicated by HR. It's made clear. So it's not just that line managers need to own it, but there's a kind of and that's what Athena did. Both employees and managers were clear on the kind of traffic light system.
Hmm.
But I think the anonymous question writer raises a really, really important question, which is how do we get managers able to have these very difficult, very emotional conversations?
Mm,
And of course they are hard. Of course they're hard, right? The day that a manager comes skipping into work thinking, oh, I've got to have a difficult conversation with somebody, it's the day they shouldn't be in leadership. But neither should they avoid them. And I think this ability to have a difficult conversation is something where we can coach. So we can provide them with not scripts, but we can coach them into. So, how is, if someone handles this, or if someone describes that, or if somebody pushes back in this way, how might you handle it? So I think there's definitely a coaching role here. I think we
hmm
provide them with very clear, simple toolkits and flow. Identify the behavior, be clear about the consequence of their actions, describe the impact that it's having, and then encouraging the individual and the manager to find a way through. So I think we can provide them with that. We can also give them great chat GPT prompts, right? You know, anonymously, obviously, but the ability to actually describe a situation and how might I handle that, so they've got it in
Yeah.
the moment when they need it.
Yeah.
So I think there's a whole raft of things that we can do to help managers get better at that, but it's never going to be easy, and it's never going to be the thing that they look forward to doing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so just sort of being conscious of time, but I still want to sort of talk about it because I think it's probably still on people's minds. We've talked a bit about, or quite a lot about surveys actually, but how can we get better insight without sort of adding more survey fatigue?
Yeah. So I think, the key thing here is about you mix it up, right? We don't want to be only asking the same questions over and over and over again. So I think if you're going to use pulse survey questions, make sure that they're topical, that they change, that it kind of
Hmm.
feels fresh and different. Use sampling. You don't have to ask everybody in the organization. You can sample, giving managers their own the ability to ask their own questions of things that
Mm,
matter to them and their team. Very, very powerful. Why does it have to be owned by us? Because if we're surveying their employees, there's always going to be a degree of defensiveness that crops up. So I think we can absolutely give them the ability and the toolkits and the technology to ask their own questions. H&H did that, that ability to and they found that levels of engagement from managers in the results, the responses, and then taking action increased significantly when they were owning it and driving it themselves. So I think, sample, mix it up, make it topic based, use a blend of qualitative and quantitative insights, but also just don't keep repeating the same questions to the same group of people over and over again.
Yeah, I agree completely. I love the idea of giving the toolkit to managers and to teams as well, because I think that immediately kind of transforms it from sort of an engagement piece, which, like you said, can be met with a little bit of hostility, into sort of a pure well-being. It's like the manager is demonstrating, hey, I care about how you're feeling. I want to know how my team's doing on a sort of an emotional or mental level. I
Yeah.
think that's very powerful for sure.
I love what Spotify do as well, where they have a kind of team health check and they look at sort of 2 or 3 questions. How are we functioning as a team? And that could be about, have we got too much on? Are we burning out? Are we moving sufficiently fast to address the needs of, so are we getting stuff done? Are we clear on accountabilities and so on? So,
Hmm.
and they mix the questions up and they have these team health check discussions every month, and then they rank them. And if it's a red, then there's a team. They say, what, this is how we're going to address it.
Yeah,
Can I just pick up a
yeah,
question that's come in from
of
Liz?
course. Go
Have
ahead.
you ever seen a manager disciplined for not being accountable for engagement and well-being of their teams?
Ooh.
So I personally haven't come across it, but I know that SAP um, ask pulse survey questions. They're shared generally. Salesforce, I think, do a little bit of this as well. And so the results of the pulse surveys are shared widely. So it's, publicly visible. And if you don't get decent marks as a people leader around trust, around coaching, and around appreciation, then you don't get promoted and you might not get to manage many more people. So I love the fact that, in HR, we're all about the carrot, right? We're all about giving them stuff and helping them. And that's wonderful. But equally, we need a little bit of teeth sometimes.
Yeah, completely. Just on the topic of teams as well, I think there's also a brief conversation to be had here for HR business partnering, which is that there is the potential for operational friction points, and I think that's super important because we need to understand that actually, going into a business, looking at the way that teams are delivering work. And understanding that an inefficient process can also impact well-being and engagement, I think is also, yeah, just really, really important.
Yeah, and when I was at the BBC, it always amazed me when I first got there that my teams were designing policy and process for BBC teams who were in
Mm,
editorial, content production, news, technology, and so on. And some of them had never actually visited a site.
yeah.
They'd never been into a gallery when you're putting together a news program and seen the pressure that they're under. They hadn't
Mm,
been to a production site to watch the news series of, I don't know, Peaky Blinders or whatever being recorded. And again, the hours they were doing, and just how difficult it was to comply with some of the processes. And I think this sense of, we're sort of subjecting HR from HR, we're subjecting people who are, frontline, busy, under a lot of pressure. I loved what Virgin Trains did. They kind of did this observation where they would go out and just almost like a day in the life of, so they would go
mm,
and they'd watch a train driver, they'd watch a customer service assistant,
mm,
a guard on a train, and they'd be looking for, when are they pressurized, when have they got some downtime, when have they looking at their smartphone, when do they see a colleague, do they see a leader? And instead of it being communication, learning, performance management interventions to suit the team, it became, when is it right for our clients, our employees?
mm.
When might they have a bit of headspace and downtime to actually engage with that bit of learning or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
And I just like that. I think that that kind of sense of let's fit it in around them rather than when does it suit us.
Yeah, definitely. So let's maybe just sort of recap again here quickly. So we've sort of identified the problem. We've talked about it from quantitative perspective, from a qualitative perspective. We've spoken about how to elevate the engagement from a cultural perspective, and we've talked about what or how we can be great listeners as well. I do think there is maybe another element to explore here, which is how do we demonstrate appreciation? And we sort of touched on a little bit with recognition, but it's important to sort of understand how that positively impacts engagement. So, Lucy, you mentioned communication earlier. Um, when it comes to sort of internal communication, what role does that have in engagement fatigue, do you think?
Yeah, so I think that, we talked about honest communications, but there's also something about human language, understanding how people like to be communicated with, regularity, making sure that you're talking to people, even if, it's not even if you haven't got huge amounts to say, you're just letting them know. But I think all of that builds up trust. I think there's also something about understanding the persona in your teams.
Hmm.
So we see this being used in marketing a lot, and we're now increasingly seeing it being used in HR. Really understanding what might be driving that fatigue,
Mm.
burnout, or how do they like to be communicated with, and really thinking about that kind of personalizing of the message and the medium. We need to, I think, get much more effective. That one size definitely doesn't fit all, right? So I think that there's tons that we can do around communication. And of course, the biggest one, which we just touched on, is that communication is rarely about broadcast. It's about listening. It's about understanding. It's about, again, listening not to fix, but to understand.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess speaking from a practical perspective, what does great communication look like today?
Well, I think it's little and often, it's
Hmm.
personalized, and it's human. I think I would say would be the kind of the three key things. Um, so it's not broadcast, it's not PowerPoint, it's not scripts, it's not about the numbers. It's honest, personalized, and frequent conversations.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that kind of goes back to our sort of peer-to-peer communication setting as a way of communicating together, right? And I
Yeah,
really like
that's a
that sort of
really, really good point to make, actually, because I think so often we think about it as kind of cascade and hierarchical,
yes,
but
exactly.
actually creating the forums, is it forums? Anyway, creating the environments where people can share, people can communicate, people can just offload in a safe space, but also keeping a focus on, kind of constructive, respectful adult, I think is really important.
Yeah, yeah. And just to sort of pick up on your, I guess, corporate broadcast piece as well, I think that's sort of not to do that is the thing we 100% should be doing. I guess the opposite of that is creating, I guess, kind of like a story-led communication style, right? If we create a narrative that everyone can get behind, everyone's on this communal journey together in the organization. I think that is, yeah, I think it's a great idea. And also that kind of projects culture in a way as well.
Yeah, and also allowing leaders and helping them to develop their own stories.
Mm,
Because, yeah, of course we can have the big corporate narrative and the big corporate stories, and we can, see some fantastic work there. But actually hearing from a leader, hearing them talk about their own humiliations or their own trials or their own challenges or where they got something wrong, or that's incredibly powerful.
yeah.
And I think too often we give leaders scripts and points to nail rather than saying, this is how we want people to feel by the end of it. Find your own way of telling that story. Um, and, I've done it. I've produced the frequently asked questions and the scripts, and they've parroted it, and it really has bombed. Whereas
Mm,
actually saying, these are the, one or two points we'd like you to land, but be free, be open,
mm.
and talk about your own personal story that's relevant, because that inspires commitment and trust and action rather than a kind of cynicism.
Yeah, it creates this well, it deliberately breaks down this aura that someone is kind of on a pedestal, right? It paints them as an actual human being,
Yeah,
and it
completely.
makes them more relatable, and that's ultimately what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I remember talking to the HR director of Discovery, and she said, prior to COVID, they used to do the big town hall sessions where the chief exec would
Hmm.
stand up and deliver this kind of perfectly manicured presentation. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
during COVID, of course, that all fell apart. So he's sat there in his lounge, and the kids are coming in, the cat's walking across the screen, and he's talking about how he's put on weight during lockdown. And afterwards, they said, we'll never go back to the town hall because
Yeah.
actually that humanized him and connected people who felt that they could open up and they could share stuff and they could ask questions in a way that they never could have done prior.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's keep on the theme of appreciation then. When it comes to recognition, how does that fit into engagement and well-being and general connection building?
I mean, most people leave an organization because they don't feel valued. And that could be feeling valued in terms of their ability to progress. It could be that they don't feel valued in terms of their the amount they're getting financially, or it just could be because people don't tell them they're doing well. They're just not. There was a piece of research, and I can't remember who did it, but they asked a group of managers, and they said, how often do you tell your people that you recognize them, you appreciate them? Not talking about money, but just saying, good job. And
Mm,
they were something like 7 or 8 out of the managers out of 10 were going, oh, I tell them all the time. And then they asked the people who work for them, and they asked the same question, but in reverse: how often does your manager say you're doing a decent job? And I think it was something like two out of the every 10 said, we hear it frequently. The rest of them hardly ever. Um, so I think that there's a mismatch there, and it's so vital. When you ask people about, the recognition that meant most to them, they're not often talking about the big bonuses. In fact, almost never talk about the big bonus. They talk about recognition that was special to them. It was unexpected. So it isn't just the big set piece. It wasn't just end of year. It was
hmm
in the moment. It was personal,
mm,
unexpected, and it was something that they valued. All right.
yeah,
So, if they're the extrovert and they like the big shout out, it was the big shout out. If they're struggling because they've got loads of childcare, it was time off. If they're really into their kind of, learning and stretch assignments, that was the opportunity to do something that stretched them further. So I think there's
yeah.
there's always it's such an exciting area, recognition, and we just miss a trick. And I think if we could help our managers just think with using nudges, getting them to
Hmm.
recognize that this isn't about money, this is just those in the moments.
Yes.
In fact, after this, I'm gonna write to some members of my team and let them know they've done a good job, because I just suddenly think they're thinking I'm spouting out here, and I haven't done it myself for a few
It's the
days.
level of emotional intelligence we want to see from managers.
Exactly, I'm going to do it straight after this.
Absolutely. Okay, so thinking on a sort of a practical perspective, then, what are some ways that we can encourage that level of recognition without it seeming performative? How can we make it genuine?
So I think, first of all, understand the people that work for you, what
Hmm.
matters to them. We see companies like Kimpton Hotels, we see others doing almost like a kind of personal preference manual, or asking them during onboarding, tell us about the best recognition you ever had at work, and then sharing that insight with leaders and managers. So I think that's a powerful way that we can kind of get a sense of what matters to them. I think encouraging leaders and managers to through using nudges. So just
Hmm.
telling them they need to do more of this, they're not going to do it, are they? But actually, I think that if we can nudge them in the moment, just like you nudged me, right? You just reminded me that actually this is something I could do. So
Hmm.
we see organizations like Google using nudges, Ellucian using nudges, using tech-based approaches to give a little nudge to a manager in the moment and just make a suggestion about just let two people in your team today know what a great job they've done.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
think technology, Melp, I know, has the ability to personalize based around what matters to them. But it's again a bit like communication, as frequent as you can, honest and genuine, and personalized.
yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, just keeping track of time here, if anyone needs to leave at on the hour, then thank you very much for joining. We'll be in touch. I will send some sort of takeaway PDF around so you can sort of really take these learnings and bring them into your organization. Lucy, if you're happy to stay for sort of 5 extra minutes or something like this, then maybe we
Yeah,
can keep
no
the conversation
problem.
going. There is one question that I really want to address from Uyen in the chat, which is, oh, so many people talking. Let me just get back to it. Do you have any tips or advice for good engagement and recognition for supporting multicultural or globally diverse teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's a minefield, isn't it? Because what you can't do is assume that what's necessarily going to work for you is going to work for them. So
Yeah.
I think you just ask the question, right? You just, again, it's that honesty, it's that openness. Just ask the question. Most people will not be offended by that. Um, but assuming that everybody's going to enjoy a night of going out to the pub and having a few drinks is not necessarily going to work for everybody. And that's not just
Mm,
about multicultural teams. It's also about people with child commitments or people who work from home. Or so I
mm,
think it's about that kind of sense of what would work for this person in in the moment. What would they want? And if you don't know, you can ask.
yeah. Yeah. Just ask. I
Yeah,
think that's a tremendous learning, actually. I don't think we do enough of that, actually.
yeah.
Um, you touched on personalization. I kind of want to shift the conversation a little bit further, kind of past appreciation, and I guess by extension of appreciation, kind of employer value proposition as well. And that is not just exclusively saying here's an inflation adjusted wage or whatever. So how does I guess benefits and the wider employee experience come into the conversation of personalization?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always hard when you're an organization and you have multiple needs, wants, preferences that you're trying to cater for. I really like what Virgin Group did. They recognized that trying to have all the answers within the HR team was always going to be a problem.
Mm,
What they could do was share with their employees how much budget they had, what were people using, and get them involved in the trade-offs. And so it was an incredibly adult to adult, open conversation about this is what we value from our brand perspective, from our employee value proposition. So things like flexibility was really important,
hmm
trust was really important, well-being was important. But they also said, but what matters to you? And of course, people can't just come up with crazy ideas because they're saying, right, well, here's the budget. You're involved in helping understand, make the trade off. So it was a very grown
mm,
up conversation, which I think is brilliant. What was fascinating is it led to some very creative approaches. So things like loved ones leave, which is, you know, something that it kind of went further than they could have done with this idea that they're not going to have a separate leave allowance for different parts of your family or bereavement or childcare, or it was just loved ones leave. And so it was very kind of generic. They also had this brilliant approach, which they called, excuse my language, but the Screw It, Let's Do It Fund. And this was to fund those kind of slightly wacky, very personal things that people might want to apply
mm,
for, and but they weren't going to fund centrally on an ongoing basis. So they allowed for flexibility, they allowed for personal choice, but they involved employees in kind of what are the trade-offs and how do we balance this.
yeah, yeah. And I suppose just thinking logically as well, if we offer a higher level of personalization, then what we're actually offering is a higher level of relevance to people's lives. And that has the knock-on effect of increasing the uptake of what you're offering, which means that in a way you actually get better return on investment. You know the money that you're spending as an organization is actually getting used reliably. And that also kind of increases the perceived value that an employee gets from their organization, right? And I think that's also really, I'm thinking really big picture here, but that's also really important from a business partner perspective, because the most important thing really from an HRBP is talent pipeline. The business doesn't function if there is not a constant talent pipeline. And already we see people, despite the macroeconomic trends at the moment, people still go where they feel most valued, right? And
Absolutely. So
so,
number one reason why talent leaves is because they don't feel valued. And as I say, that could be that just they haven't been told they're doing a good job, or it could be financial recognitions, or it could be that they're getting lack of career progression. And that's why I really like the kind of concept of a stay conversation, which is, you
mm,
know, what made you join us? What might make you want to leave? And having those in a kind of early enough that you can do something about it. Now, you're not going to sort everyone's issues. Some people will leave you, and that's probably a good thing, you know, kind of create some space and movement. But there may be some talented people that are going when you could have done something about it and you didn't have that conversation. Having an exit interview is way too late. You want to be having
mm,
stay conversations.
yeah, definitely. And I guess sort of just picking up on that sort of return on investment piece there, on that very big picture ramble, I think more so than ever, when you come up with various HR initiatives, regardless of what they might be, C-suite is always asking, okay, what is the real impact here? Demonstrate it to me, quantitatively. What is the value? So, question to you, Lucy, when it comes to proving the value, how do we do that? How do we move past just vanity metrics?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and it's one that we kind of worry about continually. But I do think that, I mean, maybe it's just my age, right? That if leaders don't get by now that having a motivated, engaged workforce that are turning up to
Hmm.
work, feeling good about who they work for, if they can't see that that's actually going to increase productivity and performance and
Mm,
profitability and innovation, they shouldn't be in leadership roles. But that's
mm.
maybe just my kind of
I think
age
that's
and
very
lack
logical.
of
I think
tolerance.
that's
It's like,
logical.
it's like, really, do we have to keep making this case? Where I do think
Yeah.
we do need to be able to make the case is if we're investing in a benefits approach, or we're investing in development, then I think it's only fair that we're able to see that we have been, and it has to be related to the bottom line in some way. I think we're I think well within our rights to say, of course, we're dealing with human beings, so causation is always going to be more complicated than a
Hmm.
single lever. There are so many other factors, but I do think we should have our eye on what is it that we're trying to influence. Is it increased agility, increased decision speed of decision making and action? Is it
Mm.
profitability? Is it innovation? What is it that is aligned to the direction of our organization, and how can we demonstrate we're playing our part in that? Will be one factor in many, but I do think we need to tap into that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, just to sort of unpack that very quickly, I think I agree with you completely on this idea of, if you don't link productivity to well-being, then actually, what part of the picture don't you see? The link is quantitatively there. It's undeniable, I
Yeah,
think. And I
exactly.
and I think yeah, I think ultimately productivity is also it's an aggregate metric, right? It's 100% it's well-being, 100% it's engagement, but it's really the whole picture of an organization, about how you deliver
Completely.
work, the processes, the culture, all of this.
It's about having the equipment to do the job. It's about having the skills and competencies. There's so many
Yes.
factors. I'm just conscious that we haven't got to everybody's question. So just to make the offer that if people still have a burning question, I'm particularly thinking about Remigius' question, which is a great question. At what point do you make the decision to let the employee go, especially if they're
Mm,
consistently disengaged? If you're
mm.
comfortable, Tobias, I'm going to answer that,
Go ahead.
and then we'll probably need to draw it to a close. But
I
I
agree. Yeah.
think I think that with disengagement, there is the kind of, it's just really hard work, but I think we do need to look at the impact that they're having on their team, the impact that they're potentially having on the customer, um, and I think the sooner we address it. And if we don't see any improvement, we should let them go. And I think we let this drift way too long, way too often. I think that, everybody's allowed some downtime. Everybody's, you're not supposed to be upbeat all the time. But I think if you're consistently disengaged, people know it. Everyone knows who that person is in the team. And I think it just sucks the energy out of the team. It sucks the energy of the manager. And I think addressing it sooner rather than later. I think, I always like the approach, which is, I've noticed you're behaving like this. This can't go on. So how long do you need to turn it around? It's not about what we're going to do, but how long do you need to turn it around? And give them a time frame. You can bitch and moan for another couple of weeks, and then I want to see an improvement. Give them the option of how long they're going to be for turning it, how long they're going to take to turn it around, because it's so demoralizing for the rest of the team and just sucks the energy out of organizations.
Yeah, completely. I agree. Okay, cool. We are famously over time, but I think it was a fantastic conversation, Lucy.
Oh, well, I hope people have got some value from it. And if we didn't answer your question, they can always contact me on LinkedIn. I'm really happy to respond there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll be making a full sort of post webinar pack for everyone. We'll circulate that around with everyone. So hopefully there'll be some real, learnings there that you can take and sort of embed in your organizations. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. It was lovely to see you all in the chat. Thank you very much for all the engagement, all the questions. It was lovely to see such a high levels of engagement. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us. It was
It's a
fantastic.
pleasure. And I think we'd really like to know, because we made a conscious decision, Tobias and I, not to use slides and just to have a
Mm,
conversation. And, if you enjoyed that new approach, slightly different approach, then we'd really love to know.
yeah, absolutely. Cool. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. It was lovely to see you. Hopefully, we'll see you again soon. And Lucy, thank you very much once again.
My pleasure. Lovely to see you. See you again. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.